We're going to now try to plot all this data on one graph. So to do this, I'm going to highlight the data. So I'm going to hold my mouse down or your touchpad down and highlight all the data. Then I'm going to go to Insert Chart, or again, I could use the chart wizard here in this button. And now I have created a graph. If I want to smooth the data out like we did before, I can come here to Customize, and in my chart style, I can smooth out my data and I can plot the null value. So you can see it's kind of filled things in. If you look at this though, it's really hard to read the difference in here. The scale with the scale here, I don't really see much change with the pressure. And this actually is a significant change. Like you die if you're not in a pressurized airplane at a high enough altitude. So it matters. But we don't see much of a change here because of the scale. So what I want to do is I actually want to have two y-axes on this. Everything was against altitude, so I'm leaving, in this case, I'm leaving altitude on the x-axis, but I want pressure on one y-axis and temperature on the other y-axis. So in order to do that, in my customize here, I'm going to come here to series. So if I customize the series, right now it says apply to all series. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just say pressure, and then I'm going to, for pressure, the series that I'm talking about is the left axis. So it's going to have pressure on the left axis. And then if I'm going to come here, I'm going to click right axis. It automatically is like, oh, you probably mean the other one, but I'm going to go right axis and I'm going to say temperature. So now what it's doing is it's saying left axis. If you look here, so temperature is my left axis. And remember temperature, so this is where it's important to look back at your data. Temperature goes to this negative 72 up at the top, it was 15, okay? So temperature is going to be this axis here. So temperature is my left axis. So now I'm going to want to make sure that is clearly labeled. Otherwise, person looking at this graph is going to have no idea what's going on. So I'm going to come in here, my chart axes, and you'll notice now it actually will say the vertical axes, the right vertical axes and the vertical axes. So the vertical axis here, it's just going to be essentially my temperature. And so you'll see that should appear right there. So that's my temperature. So the left is kind of the default, so it's just saying the vertical axes. Then if I say right vertical axes, it's meaning over here. And my right vertical axes, remember, was my pressure. Okay, so my pressure, and my pressure, I believe, was it PSI? I'm thinking it was. Yes, pressure, it was in PSI. Okay. So now I go ahead. And so now pressure, here's my key at the top. Blue line is pressure. So if you're reading this graph and you're like, okay, at this place here, and then you're going to read the pressure at this elevation, you're going to read over. You might say, this is so spread out. This would be really hard to make an estimate in here. You can actually also change your tick marks or things like that in your graph. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But again, notice how I changed the title here. Temperature, I labeled, I made sure I had the two axes and I put the title in, and then the pressure over here. And again, always double check your data. Pressure was 0 to 15. So make sure, and yep, that's pressure. Make sure it's labeled correctly. If you want to put in some minor tick marks too, so it's a little bit easier to read,